Hello everyone, I'm Ryan from Fireside Knicks with my friend and co-host Dylan Backer, and we're continuing our report card series, and this time we're moving towards forwards and wings. Now, obviously the Knicks, not in the same vein as the guard position, but they did get a lot of, I think, good production from the wing position. There were a lot of standout players. There were some, really just key pieces to this team came from this position. You're going to get a sense of the theme of this report card series where it's that the Knicks played really well at a lot of different position groups. They were a team that, were able to get a lot of production from a lot of different pieces in a lot of different ways. So we're going to go with grading all of the wings. Now, we mentioned this in the point guard episode, the guard episode. If you guys aren't aware, we're including Grimes and Hart with the wings. We didn't include them with the guards just based on their style of basketball. So they'll be in this video. Kind of getting it started here with the guy who I think, he was the only All-NBA selection on the team, Julius Randle. He's probably the first guy to get this started with. So, Dylan, I'm interested to hear, what's your grade for Julius Randle in the season? What is your reasoning behind that grade?
Obviously Randle had a fantastic season, an all-NBA season, and, it was really good bounce back after a rough 2021-22 season. Some might be shocked with my grade, but I'm going to give him an A, and the reason I'm not giving him an A+ is because of the postseason, and some may find that not fair. I get it. But, this is not a grading of simply just the regular season. This is combined from the regular season and the postseason. So, I think it's fair to give him an A. Obviously, 25 points leading the Knicks in scoring, 10 rebounds a game, 4.1 assists, 46 from the field. I think he was like 35% from three or something. Very good year overall, right? But his playoffs were rough. And I think everyone here knows that. I'm not with the Randle disrespect he was getting after the postseason. I'm not with all that. But it is, clear that he did struggle in the postseason. It was rough. It was not good to watch whatsoever. I know he was playing hurt, but still, it was just not what we saw in the regular season from Randle, which is the only reason it stopped me from giving him an A+. And at this rate, I think the only one who deserves an A+ at this point is Jalen Brunson, who we mentioned in our last episode. I think he'll be the only one that'll get an A+ out of me. But, Julius Randle was great. He was great. I'm not going to, sit here and act like he wasn't a big reason why we're the 5th seed. He was a huge reason why we're the 5th seed. I think an A is a good grade for him, considering that the postseason was rough. If I was really mean, I would have given him something lower, but I'm not going to be like that. I think an A is fair. He was great. He really started to get that three-pointer fall a bit. He scored a lot higher at a better rate. He had an actual good budding partner with Brunson this time. He didn't have to just carry the team by himself. Obviously in the playoffs it was a different story, but throughout the regular season, he played a huge role into us getting that 5th seed and us getting 47 wins on the season and pretty much defying all those expectations. Making All-NBA third team is a huge accomplishment too. Second All-NBA team in 3 years. I'm really happy what Randle did, and I'm a huge Randle fan, so I was really pleased to see him bounce back after a rough season last year. Yes, it stunk that he wasn't good in the playoffs, and I really wish he would have performed better, but his regular season was that good. He does deserve a lot of credit for that, which is why I still gave him an A. If he was great in the postseason, I would have given him an A+, but unfortunately he wasn't. That's the only thing that stopped me, but I think an A is fair. I don't think that's really disrespectful in a way, because I think he was really, really good and he deserves to be credited for that. So that's kind of just my take on it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I said this when we talked about, Emmanuel Quickley's grade, and I gave him an A+ initially, and you explained, kind of why you gave him an A instead of an A+. I realized, if I'm going to give an A+ to Jalen Brunson, I think he was the best player on the Knicks this year. So A+, the best grade is going to go to the best player. No one else is going to get that grade. So I think A is a great grade to give for Julius Randle. Look, everyone can get mad at him for the postseason, but as you mentioned, there's a way to criticize a player and also stay fair to them, right? You cannot just sit here and pretend like the regular season didn't happen and that the regular season and that the seeding that the Knicks got was not crucial to their ability to win the first round matchup. Again, we can laugh at Joel Embiid all we want and the James Harden and his situation in the 76ers, but that team was not losing in the first round to the New York Knicks. If you win the series 100 times, do the Knicks win at least a couple? Yeah, of course. It's not like they're going to get beaten 100 times. But in the majority, the vast majority of those simulations, the Knicks would have lost, right? Joel Embiid would have, it's hard to stop him, right? And James Harden, for as inconsistent as he is, all it would take is a couple of really good postseason games to put the Knicks away, right? So, Julius Randle playing at the level he did, giving us an All-NBA and All-Star caliber season is the reason why the Knicks were able to be the 5th seed in a pretty good East, right? We're watching the Miami Heat right now take a 2-0 lead over the Celtics. It's not like the East was devoid of good teams, right? The Nets were pretty good all year, and even after KD and Kyrie left, Bridges took off and became a really good player. The East was loaded, and the Knicks were able to get a 5th seed, and they were able to get a first-round matchup with the Cavs instead of 76ers or Celtics or Bucks, and that's the reason why they were in the second round and given a chance to even go to the Eastern Conference Finals in the first place. So, end of the day, again, when you're all NBA, like, how can I give you anything worse than an A, right? It's all NBA is not like, it's so hard to just get to that point, right? There's 3 all NBA teams, and there is a plethora of talented wings and forwards in the league that could have taken that spot. And I get it. It's not first team, it's third team, but it's still impressive. So, second time all NBA for Julius Randle, a great season overall. Not a great finish, but, got to give him I think giving him an A makes a lot of sense. But, I think the next guy you kind of look at, in terms of, we're not going to talk about Josh Hart just yet because he was a trade piece. I wanted to focus on Quentin Grimes first because he was here all season. He kind of had a weird year in the sense that he had his ups, he had his downs. He had been the guy the Knicks had as their primary defensive option against the toughest opponents. Like he would be on Donovan Mitchell, or he would be on, just other really tough wings or guards who could score a lot. I thought he did a pretty good job this season, had a really strong sophomore year. What do you think about Quentin Grimes? What grade will you give him on the year?
Right, so, Grimes was obviously very good this year, very productive. We got a lot of value out of him. Some might view this grade a little generous. I'm going to give him an A-. And the reason I give him that high of a grade is because this was a guy who didn't play a whole lot his rookie season. He was off the bench, and honestly, he didn't even crack the rotation until almost the new calendar year last season. So, this was his first real chance to kind of show what he can do. He's given the starting shooting guard spot early in the season, and he maintained that throughout the rest of the season. Started a couple times in the playoffs. I know his playoffs were rough. His playoffs were good. I'm not going to knock on him too hard for the postseason, though, and the reason because this was his first postseason. This was his first real chance at, real time seeing that kind of environment, on the floor himself. So I'm not going to knock him too hard for the postseason. This was his first, full season, technically. So to really criticize his postseason would just be kind of mean. I'm not going to do that. The reason I give him the A-, though, 11 points per game and, 39% from 3 in your second year in the league. I mean, that's very productive. We got a lot of production at him on that side of the floor. And, of course, the defense, like you said, guarding guys like Donovan Mitchell and Jimmy Butler in the postseason, he held his own. I know it wasn't perfect, but he did hold his own. And, he still has plenty of time to develop those aspects of his game, both on the offensive side and the defensive side. So both of those will get better as time goes on, and I was just really impressed with his development. I mean, it was really quick, and I mean, he kind of sometimes he would look a little confused on the offensive side, kind of a little lost in the rhythm a little bit, but oftentimes he really, really helped not only with the floor spacing, but the ball movement and the pace. That every time he'd be in that corner and then he would drive baseline and dump it off to Mitch. I mean, that worked so many times. It was such a fast play that defenses could not pick that up whatsoever. So that was it was just really impressive year overall for Quentin Grimes. I know it wasn't a perfect year in a sense. I know it's not 11 points out of your shooting guard. You're probably wondering oh, that's not a whole lot. I mean, this is a second year player. This is his first full season. It was the first time he was given a starting nod for the full season. I mean, you got to give him a lot of credit. He battled. He played hard. He was always I know he missed earlier in the season and he missed some time, but whenever he was able to play, you never doubted his effort. You never doubted that. He always gave 100% every time. So I'm really happy with what he did this year. And the reason I gave him the A-, like I said, it's just an impressive development year. It was very quick development, very quickly integrated himself into this offense to have a big role. So that's why I gave him the A-. Some may view that a little generous, and I get it, but I personally think this was a positive year for Quentin Grimes on both sides, and I do think he deserves to be credited for that, given the circumstance that this was his first full season in a sense. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I went with a B+. I personally felt as if the performance for Grimes was really good this year, but I wanted to hold off on giving anyone an A that wasn't quickly quickly Brunson or Randall. But Grimes was really good this year. I think that Quentin Grimes is someone that has the potential to be so much more than he is right now, right? I genuinely do think that he has the potential to be more than a 380 guy. I think that you look at the ability to get to the rim, his 2-point percentage was actually really good this year. He can shoot really well. He's great defender who takes on really difficult assignments, which I think is an important thing to mention here. He wasn't just going out and, defending the team's third option scoring wise. He was going out there and was taking on some really tough defensive assignments. Very versatile defender. I think there's room for him to grow if he can continue to develop that 3-point shot, get a little more consistent, find a little more consistency from his defense as well. We could see a guy who gives 14, 15 points a game. Great 3-point percentage, great defense, and is a key role player on a team that's trying to contend for a championship. I know that there's going to be talks around whether he'll get traded or not, because you're either good enough to be a core part of this team or good enough to get traded if you're an NBA contender, right? So that is obviously something that's going to be monitored over the offseason. But given what he's done, given the progression he's made, I personally think that I can't be anywhere close to upset with the production I got. I think B+, A- is a great range for him. I'm going to stick with my B+, but I see your case for B- or A-, excuse me. But with that being said, another guy who stepped in and, they were questioning, he actually took over for Quentin Grimes in the postseason as a starter when Grimes had that injury situation with his shoulder. Josh Hart, right? Josh Hart is someone who the Knicks really relied on in that once they got him, right? When they acquired him, there were some talks about, did the Knicks do enough at the deadline? I think Josh Hart settled a lot of those conversations. Obviously, the Knicks fell short of a championship, but unless they got a star player, I didn't feel like that was going to happen anyways. But Josh Hart really unlocked a lot in this team. He added spacing. He added, just grit. He added defense. He just added everything this team felt like they needed, right? He was a great rebounding guard. He could do some playmaking if need be. Again, great defender, super tough, kind of embodied that New York environment. He felt like a 90s Knick, right? He felt like he was someone that, that would be on one of those teams on that 94 Knicks team or on a team that's battling against Michael Jordan. He's just that type of role player. And, I say role player in a good way, right? I don't think role player is always necessarily a bad thing. He does his role extremely well. And I hope the Knicks bring him back this offseason. It looks like they will. But, I gave him an A, right? I think he's the fourth guy who's going to get my A. I think he's the last guy I'm going to give an A to. What are your thoughts on that? And what grade did you give him on the season?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Hart, we got him in that trade from, for Cam Reddish. Cam Reddish kind of now just a lost cause in Portland, not really doing much there. He wasn't really doing much with us, so Josh Hart's kind of the new backup small forward. So, that's something you really like. We got good production out of him, and I agree with your A rating. I honestly am going to give him an A as well. In 25 games with the Knicks, 10 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 steals, 58% from the field, 51% from three. He didn't shoot a lot of threes, but he was really efficient in that area. I'm really, really just happy with what he did. I mean, he was kind of the team's Swiss Army knife when he came over. If you ever needed a bucket in transition, or if you needed a spot up three in the corner, or if you needed, some good ball movement, Hart was kind of that guy to do that. And obviously he was good on the defensive side as well. And he pretty much gave you everything you needed. Obviously, he doesn't do really any of those things at an elite level. He doesn't really I wouldn't classify him as like an elite defender or an elite scorer, but he's a very productive one at both. He's very productive defensively. He's very productive offensively. And I think I can almost say he's an elite rebounder though, for guards especially, or wings or whatever you want to call it. For his position, he's a very elite rebounder. I am very pleased that we got him for that, because we badly needed some rebounding outside of Mitchell Robinson, and he provided that a lot, and he really helped us big time. I mean, I don't think it's really coincidence that we went 17-8 in the regular season with Josh Hart, and combining the regular season and the playoffs, we were 23-13. That's a very good record, and those are very good numbers, and a lot of that is credited to adding Josh Hart to this lineup. And he was able to form chemistry with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle really quickly, and I think it helps the fact that he had already played in Villanova with Jalen Brunson, won a couple championships there. He played in LA with Julius Randle, and in New Orleans as well. I think that helps, the fact that he has already played with these guys before, your main guys, and I think this is a guy you got to keep around for a while. I know it's already expected that Josh Hart is going to sign an extension with the Knicks. I think they have to do it. They got to sign him an extension. We'll probably make a video sometime of, discussing what kind of contract he should get from the Knicks. But, just to give a broad number, you definitely got to sign him to at least a 3 or 4 year deal. I think you got to keep this guy around for a while. Even if he's not going to, give you 20 points a game, if he's going to give you the production that he gave you and that impactful, no matter where you put him, because you could put him at starting or on the bench and he'll still be just as impactful, then you got to keep him around, man. You got to make him part of your core. I really think you do. Whether no matter what they decide to do with the rest of the roster, whatever they shake up, I think you got to make Josh Hart a main component of this team for its future. And I think you would agree with me on that he is a huge part of it. And just, overall, just really happy with what he did this season. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think you make excellent points about just how crucial he is to this team and how crucial he is to this core. This team played championship caliber basketball when he was added to the lineup. I think that's something that's kind of important for us to mention here. They weren't just good. They were a championship caliber team. They played not just record-wise, not just scoring-wise, not just defensively, all of it together. Net rating, all the advanced metrics you want to look at, all the traditional metrics you want to look at. This team was playing championship basketball, right? And, with the development, year 3 of Quentin Grimes, we've seen the leap that quickly took from year 2 to year 3, and just how in the NBA, how hard it is to be really good in your first 2 years. You hope to get a better version of, maybe RJ Barrett, who we'll talk about in a few. And just overall, you really feel like this team is going to get better next year in terms of the talent around Josh Hart. So Josh Hart he's still here, right? If you bring him back, he is still here, and this team is still the same team that played at that championship pace. There's no really other large free agents. Yes, there are decisions you're going to have to make about Obi Toppin. Are you going to still keep him around? But it's not like he's the reason why they were at this place. No disrespect to Obi Toppin, of course, but, it's not like you're losing a Jalen Brunson or a Julius Randle or even a Quentin Grimes or an Emmanuel Quickley, right? It's really, you just got to bring back Josh Hart, and your team is the same as it was last year. And then any improvements you make after that are improvements on what you accomplished last season. But as you mentioned, Josh Hart, just kind of the perfect piece of this team, just meshed so well. He was so good for this team, and I hope that we can keep seeing him going forward. I don't know if I'm getting choked up because of how good he was. I mean, he's so good, he's causing my throat to close up. But anyways, with that being said, I mentioned RJ Barrett just now. I think he's someone who kind of had a really weird year, right? All regular season, it's like, dude, what's wrong with this guy? Like, what's going on? Like, what's going on defensively? Why is he so poor defensively? Why is he so inconsistent with his three-point shot? And then the postseason comes around, and just like we all expected, we expect RJ Barrett was their second best player, right? Just as we expected all year. And on a year where Emmanuel Quickley was almost the sixth man of the year, where Josh Hart was incredible for the Knicks in the regular season, where Julius Randle was all NBA, right? RJ Barrett, who was struggling all year, finally puts it together in the postseason. Is that going to affect his grade to the point where I'll say, yeah, he's an A player because he had a strong postseason? No. But does it matter to me? Absolutely, right? If you're looking at what RJ Barrett is at this point in his career, is he a player who has star potential? Not necessarily. He's not the guy that he's not the guy with the, franchise savior kind of potential he had when he was initially drafted. But I still think he has the makings of being a decent NBA player. It's just a matter of what the fit is with the Knicks. It's a matter of, just trying to refine things like being better defensively. I think that's the big thing he has to work on this offseason. I've said this before, not on the podcast, but just to people I know and to people I'm friends with. If RJ Barrett's a good defender, the offense being inconsistent doesn't matter as much, right? Because he's always going to be a positive. It's like Emmanuel Quickley. He's very inconsistent with his shot, I feel like. he's a little more inconsistent than, he gets credit for, but the reason that no one really cares, and it's for a good reason, he's a great defender and he does other things really well. So when Emmanuel Quickley shoots, 2 for 8 from the field or 1 for 3 from the field, you're like, dude, he was an absolute nobody on the offensive side of the ball. And then you look, 20-something minutes, +5 or +6 on the plus minus. You're like, how the hell does he have a positive plus minus? He's such a good defender. He's an impact player. Those are the things Emmanuel Quickley does very well. I'm not saying that RJ Barrett has to be the defender Emmanuel Quickley is, but he's certainly talented enough as a defender to get to the point where he's back to a consistently good defender. He doesn't have to take the tough defensive assignments because Quentin Grimes and Josh Hart will cover those. When he's running with Emmanuel Quickley, he'll have a great defensive mate as well in Quickley. If he could just play strong defense and get a little more consistent with the offense, we're now looking at a plus player. There were talks about the Knicks potentially acquiring OG Anunoby. I know you wrote a great article about maybe the Knicks potentially looking at him on this list of candidates you had. But, can RJ Barrett not be OG Anunoby, but play that role if he's able to get his defense to where it was a couple of years ago? I think so, right? Maybe that's a little bit optimistic, but, sure, you're going from a guy who was supposed to be a franchise savior to a guy who's, we're now talking about in a role player sense, but a really good role player is still a pretty good outcome. So with that being said, I gave him a C plus B on the season, kind of somewhere in that range. I feel like relative to expectations, it was a disappointing year, but he was able to rebound at the end, and that's why I'm not gonna give him a bad grade. What do you think about that?
Right. So, I mean, like you said, the way to define RJ Barrett's season is, in my way of saying it, consistently inconsistent. And the reason I say that, I mean, looking at his numbers right here, I'm just going to go by month here. October, 40% from the field. November, 40%. December, 46% from the field. January, 45% from the field. February goes back down to 40%. March, it goes back up to 45. April, 43. And then in the postseason, we know he did really well. I don't have the numbers in front of me for his postseason, but we all know he was very, very efficient in the postseason. But, just hearing that, I mean, it tells you just how topsy-turvy his season really was. You didn't really know if he really found his rhythm for good, or if it was like just a brief, spurt of he found his rhythm and then, he goes right back down to 40% from the field, inefficient, so we didn't really know. And the reason for that inconsistencies, I gave him a B minus, and the reason I gave him a B minus instead of like a C is because that postseason he really stepped up when he needed to. We needed that out of him. We finally, got some confidence that maybe we got that kind of, playoff riser in a sense with RJ that we wanted. Obviously it's just one postseason run. He had a postseason run in 2021, but he didn't do a whole lot. But this was like his first time making it past first round, so this was a good time to get a good look at what he could do in the postseason, and I was impressed with it. I was impressed with what he did in the postseason, so therefore that's why I didn't give him such a lower grade. But the B minus, just the season was just really confusing with him. He obviously took a step back in scoring. He took a step back defensively. I can't give him a higher grade for regressing. I can't. That's just not what I should be doing. But, I can at least give him extra points for stepping up in the playoffs when those matter obviously a lot more than the regular season. But, I just hope next season, he kind of figures things out a little bit. Obviously, if he's still here, we don't know what they could do with his future. Obviously, his future's a little cloudy with the Knicks right now. But with that being said, just, I hope next season he can just, step it up a little bit and kind of find some rhythm and consistency, both on the three-point shot and in the inside. I think it's becoming increasingly clear that he needs to start going to the inside more and start slashing to the paint more often than shooting threes and settling for bad shots. There are too many times where you kind of see what he's doing out there and you kind of just feel like he's making boneheaded decisions. And I'm not saying he's a guy that makes boneheaded decisions. No, there are times you kind of see what he does, whether it's, stop and at the top of the key and don't dribble for 5-10 seconds, run out the shot clock, and then try to drive into the paint to three guys in the paint, and then you get your shot blocked, or you miss by 50 feet, or you take a contested three in the corner when you're not in rhythm or anything like that, and you just scratch your head and you're like, what are you doing? That's not what we need, right? So just looking at that, I just hope he finds some rhythm and consistency. That's really all I want. If he can find that on both sides of the floor, he can be, like you said, kind of like an OG Anunoby type player, a good two-way threat. That would be nice to have. It's what we've been waiting for. This was his fourth season in the NBA. It was still a productive season. I'm not going to sit here and act like it was not a productive season, but it was definitely a regression from his 20-point per game season last year, and especially his second half from last year. It was a regression. It's unfortunate that it was a regression. I really hope, but with that being said, RJ has a very good work ethic, so I really hope with that he can find the proper adjustments he needs to make in the offseason, work with his trainer, make those adjustments in games, and then hopefully he figures it out a bit and gets into a better rhythm. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, what's kind of weird about RJ Barrett is that I feel like he's young enough that, like, it's not out of the question for him to have a career turnaround. But we're in year 5, right? We're kind of reaching a point where it's like, all right, like, it's put up or shut up time, right? It's time to get results from RJ. But as you mentioned, I trust the work ethic, I trust the organization, I trust a lot of factors that are involved in a player's development for things to go right for RJ Barrett and for them to get the production they're looking for. But yeah, I think that, overall it's hard to grade him because you don't want to, like, there's a part of me that wants to, doesn't want to be too harsh with him, right? And I feel like that's the case with any homegrown player, right? He was the guy back in 2019 that we draft with the 3rd overall pick. And you feel like, all right, this is the start of something new for the Knicks. Obviously, that first year was not great, but you expected that. Then year 2, you make the postseason. He's the number 2 option on a playoff Knicks team that was the 4 seed, right? Like, I just want to, remembering that, it makes it really hard for me to give up on him, even though he struggled a lot this year. And then last year, of course, it was a weird year, kind of ups and downs, and then this year was not a good year for RJ Barrett. But going forward, you hope that he kind of has short-term memory with what happened in the regular season, is able to move forward from there. I know the Knicks, as an organization, will give him the chance to do so. But with that being said, another guy who was, a former top 10 pick, Obi Toppin, right? Obi Toppin definitely had a weird year, right? Like, there are moments where you're like, oh my gosh, Obi Toppin is that guy, right? And then there are moments where you're like, no, he's just a role player on this team, and I'm not sure he fits with what the Knicks are doing. So I think an even C is like fair. It's hard for me to give him a great grade, considering that, as effective as he was in the postseason at times, it just didn't feel like the shot was consistent enough from three for me to sit here and say, yeah, he deserves much better than that. He also is a role player, so it's hard for him to have the ceiling. Like, even a not great RJ season and a not great OB season are not the same thing. RJ's a shot creator. RJ starts. RJ plays a lot. So when RJ's good, it impacts the team a lot more. Whereas Toppin plays a much smaller role in the team. So I think an even C is good. I could see a C plus argument, but overall, I just feel like the fit doesn't really make sense anymore. It's not me sitting here trying to say like Toppin's no good. There's no shot here where he becomes a quality NBA player. I actually think the opposite. I think he has the chance to become a quality NBA player. I just don't think it's on a team that, one, already has their starting power forward in Julius Randle, and two, already has plenty of bench options that should get the ball and should be primary scoring options over him. So I think C is the grade I'm going to give him. What do you think about that? What did you feel about Obi Toppin this season and his future?
Right. So, I mean, was this a bad season for Obi Toppin? That might be a stretch to say, but was this a good season for Obi Toppin? No, it wasn't. But, with that, like you said, limited role, comes off the bench. He's quite frankly probably the last option that the Knicks have. And, I think they kind of showed he always played the least amount of minutes in every game and stuff like that. But with that being said, the grade I'll give him a C, maybe more like C minus range. I don't have like a specific dead grade that I'll give him in this one because it's a little confusing, but as a starter, he played only 5 games as a starter, but he played really well in those 5 games as a starter. I know a lot of those were at the end of the season. 21 points, but he did shoot 58 from the field and 44 from 3. Yes, again, those are end of the season games. I know that doesn't always mean anything, but, he has shown a few times that, when given the opportunity, he can be a productive NBA player. Can he be like a really good NBA player? I don't know. We obviously haven't gotten to see a whole lot of that. I'm not going to sit here and act like he can't be productive in some way, but with the role he's currently in, it's not really a highly productive role. He's kind of just become a spot-up shooter as a power forward, as the backup. He shoots a lot of threes, which is something I kind of wish he tones down a little bit. Even as a starter, he averaged 7 three-point attempts, which is quite frankly a lot for a power forward that has struggled to find their three-point rhythm, their entire career. That's a lot. I understand if you want to find a rhythm, you got to shoot the ball, but at the same time, we don't need a lot of threes taken out of him when his strength is literally finishing and dunking and all that stuff. So he's a bit of a confusing type. He kind of plays still like a bit of a raw prospect, which is a little alarming given that he's already 24 years old. So just looking at that, I'm hoping, in the future that he does turn it around in some way, become a little more productive, whether it's on the bench or if they find him a different home to play in, a different team, and he gets a larger role, a starting role. I do think his future on the Knicks is in peril. I really do. He almost got traded at the deadline. It was kind of shocking that he was still on the team at the deadline. He was only playing like 10 minutes a game and stuff like that in a lot of the games after the All-Star break. Obviously he played a bit in the postseason, but, it was not enough, obviously, to get us past the second round, which is unfortunate. But, I do think he's someone that can be a good NBA player, like you said. I don't necessarily doubt that he can't be, but I do want to see more out of him, and I do think it might end up having to be in a different uniform next season. I really don't know if the fit on the Knicks is the right place for him, which is unfortunate because, you could tell, even with Obi's body language sometimes on the court, that he wants to get more involved and he wants to play and he wants to be more involved in plays and the offense and all that. We've seen him, kind of get upset that he's not getting the ball when he's open or something like that. I understand the frustration. I understand he probably wants a larger role. I get that. And the Knicks honestly might need to make the right decision and, give him that bigger opportunity elsewhere. I think that would be better for him if he got a fresher start. This guy was a lottery pick. This guy was the 8th overall pick. That wasn't an accident. He was that good in college, so I really think it might be better if they just, find a trade for him. I think that'd be the best option going forward. If they do decide to keep him, I wonder what they're going to do about it. I wonder how they're going to integrate him into this system. That's really up in the air still. We have no idea because, quite frankly, out of every Knick, Obi Toppin's future as a Knick is probably the most in jeopardy. So this should be interesting. But basically, to wrap up the point, the grade I'm going to give him for this season, C minus range. Wasn't awful, but wasn't really up to where we wanted him to be. It's just whatever. So that's kind of my take on it. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, weirdly enough, I think whatever is kind of the best way to describe Obi Toppin's season. It was kind of there were flashes, right? And it sucks because, there is a world where Obi Toppin, can find consistent minutes and it was on the Knicks and maybe he becomes the player we envision him to be. But, can we blame Leon Rose or, Tom Thibodeau for saying, yeah, Julius Randle's now a 2-time All-NBA player. I'm not gonna, prioritize Obi Toppin's development over winning basketball games. I think that's, that'd be a little insane to criticize Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau for that. And, kind of weirdly enough, when they drafted him, it was with the idea of replacing Randle. And, at the time, Randle was not a very good NBA player. He was a guy who could put up pretty big stats, but wasn't very impactful. And that changed on a dime. So it's one of those things where hindsight is 2020. Yes, we could sit here and say the Knicks could have drafted this guy or that guy. But at the time, Obi Toppin was the best player available, and that's who they took. So, it's an unfortunate situation of just bad timing, bad fit, just a lot of factors that aren't to blame. You can't really blame Toppin or the Knicks for. But, it seems like his future is just somewhere else. I don't think that the Knicks necessarily, I don't even think he's that great of a fit for the bench either. I think the Knicks want more of a, true floor spacer who can also, take on some defensive assignments. Not that Toppin hasn't improved his 3-point shot, but he's just not a spot-up shooter. That's not his role. That shouldn't be his role. I know that the Knicks had to put him in that role just because there was no other way to get him involved in the offense, but, could you imagine this team with like a 3-and-D guy at the 4 spot off the bench? That would be really nice, right? So again, not really Toppin's fault that he's in this role, not really the Knicks' fault that he's in this role either. It's just a product of, things did not go as expected for Julius Randle in a good way, and things didn't go as expected for Toppin in not a great way for his development. But with that being said, the last guy who we're going to talk about, who, we initially planned to talk about him with Josh Hart, but I goofed and there was an Aaron Hicks DFA, so there are a lot of cups in this episode. But Cam Reddish was traded for Josh Hart, so he was only here for about half a year. He didn't play very much. Look, I don't think Cam Reddish was to blame for him for the fact that he wasn't that good, right? He's just not that great. It is what it is. But I feel like you have to give him an F. He was kind of he was probably the Knicks' worst player. Given Fournier was willing to play, even though he was taken out of the rotation, Rose didn't really cause much of commotion. Sims we'll talk about Sims in the next episode. But it's not like any of the guys who didn't play were giving us any off the field issues or off the court issues, excuse me. It felt like Cam Reddish just caused a lot of unnecessary stories. There was that one anonymous comment that Tom Thibodeau has his favorites or whatever. I think we all know who that anonymous person was. Cam Reddish just wasn't a good New York Knick. It was a flyer that they wanted to take. Tom Thibodeau wasn't on board with the idea. He didn't play him. I wasn't sure why they weren't playing him. And then, this year you kind of realize, yeah, no, Tom Thibodeau was right. He's not really that good. And they traded him. And some people were upset about the trade, but it turned out really well for the Knicks because Cam Reddish probably isn't going to be a Portland Trailblazer for very long. So I give him an F. What grade do you give him?
Right. So, I mean, like I mentioned before, Cam Reddish is kind of a lost cause at this point. Knicks fans, ever since he got traded and we saw how good Josh Hart is, I haven't seen many Knicks fans talk about Cam Reddish anymore, which I'm kind of happy about. But, that's just leaving my bias aside. But anyway, to give him a grade, I know you gave him an F, and I understand that. I'm going to give him a D-, and the reason I'm giving him a D- is because there were a couple decent games he had this season. In the beginning of the season, opening night, he had 19 points, and he hit that clutch shot to send the game to overtime. I know he had a couple other 15-point games or 16-point games, something like that, first couple times in the season. Those were decent games. I'm not going to knock on him for that. I think he deserves a bit of credit for that because, we didn't have Quentin Grimes at the time because he was injured. So I respect him for getting us those couple games, even though we weren't like super good at the start of the season. He did give us a handful of decent games. It wasn't a large handful, but then after that, I mean, it was a disaster. After those, once Quentin Grimes came back and they tried to put Cam Reddish back on the bench, I mean, it just didn't work. There, whatever it was, it just did not work. I mean, the Knicks traded this guy last year for a first round pick and Kevin Knox. They took, like you said, took a flyer on him. Said, why not? He's available. Maybe we could develop into something really impactful. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. Thibodeau wasn't playing him much last year. Thibodeau wasn't playing him much this year. Knicks fans were not very happy about that, which, I think a lot of us finally realized why he wasn't playing him a whole lot, because he just, in my eyes, his play style doesn't really impact winning basketball. He kind of is just a guy who puts up empty stats, a guy who will put up 13, 14, 15 points, something like that on okay efficiency or below average efficiency, but not getting many rebounds, not getting many assists. He's not really impacting the game defensively. He's not really impacting the game on other aspects other than marginal scoring. And that's not a good thing. There's a reason. That's a big reason why the Knicks let him go. He just wasn't really working. Whatever it was, it just wasn't working. There hasn't been many working situations for Cam Reddish so far in his career, unfortunately for him. I do hope, I'm not going to rag on the guy. I do hope one day he finds a place that can be a long-term home for him, even if he's not going to put up huge numbers. If he can just find a home that's a long-term stay and find a long-term role, even if it's not on a very good team. Any role is any role, and you'll take that. As an NBA player, you will take any opportunity at that point when you're struggling to stay on a team. But, with that being said, I mean, there's not much to talk about with Reddish other than just, it didn't work. It was not a good experiment. It's a good thing they let him go, and it's a good thing they were able to get Josh Hart in return for him. I applaud Leon Rose and the Knicks front office for being able to make that trade happen, because we weren't sure if Reddish had really any value whatsoever, given that, one, he wasn't productive when he played, and two, before he got traded, he had been on the bench for about 2 or 3 months. So, with that being said, I mean, just overall this season, it's a D minus, and I gave him the D. Instead of giving him the F, I gave him the D minus just because of those solid games he had at the start of the season. It was only 3 or 4 games of that, but it wasn't 0, so I do think he deserves to have a bit of credit for that. So I gave him the D minus, but he's probably gonna have the worst grade out of anyone in my Knicks report card. I know you gave him the F, and I understand the F. That's I'm not gonna disagree with the F. He wasn't that impactful whatsoever, but I also value crediting him for every single game he played, and there were some, it wasn't many, but there were some good thrown in there, so that's why I gave him the D minus. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I'm giving him an F also because I realize I'm letting the influence of people on Twitter or people on social media who said that he needed more minutes, that he was the solution, or that, them trading Cam Reddish for Josh Hart was them giving up on Cam Reddish unfairly. I'm kind of factoring that into, a little bit of my grade here, which I probably shouldn't. I think you're giving him a much better grade than I am, but I'm going to stick by it because I'm arrogant, and I'm very hard-headed. So, yeah, no, but in all seriousness, look, you can't really sit here and say that Cam Reddish, was a detriment to this team or anything like that. So I guess that's a great reason to not give him an F. He was just not good when he played, and then we didn't play him, and then people were annoying about him on social media. So I think maybe F isn't the best grade to give him. You know what? I think I just talked myself into more of a D. I'm gonna give him a D on this one. Actually, D minus. I don't want to give him the same grade I gave Fournier, just because I'm petty. But with that being said, this was a position that had a lot of weird years, again, RJ Barrett regressing dramatically. Josh Hart comes into the fold, and the Knicks look like championship contenders. Julius Randle goes all NBA again after a weird year last year. If there's one guy in this position group, and I'll keep my answer to this brief. One guy in this position group that you think is going to take the largest leap in impact next season, who is it going to be on your end? I was gonna pick Quentin Grimes, but I'm gonna go with RJ Barrett. I feel like he was so bad this year, it'd be hard for him to be this bad again. I'll go with RJ Barrett for him to go from as bad as he was this year, even if he's not great next year, and even if people are still disappointed with what his results are next year. I think it's just hard for him to get significantly worse. What are your thoughts on that, and who do you have as that guy?
Right, so, I actually agree with you, and I do think RJ will take the biggest leap. Like I mentioned before, he has a very hard work ethic. He always looks to adjust his game if something's not going right. I know sometimes it takes some time, but he does work. He worked with his trainer after Game 2 in the playoffs to make some adjustments, and look how much better he looked immediately after. Sometimes we don't see an immediate turnaround with RJ, but we did this time. So I'm hoping next season we see an immediate turnaround at the start. He's always been prone to slow starts in the season. I'm hoping next season he kind of just gets out to a very good start and just kind of continues that way. Obviously, some slumps are going to happen. It happens to every NBA player. You can't expect him to be 100% perfect all the way through. Even the MVP has some bad games. It happens. But I'm just hoping for a consistently good season out of RJ next year. That's really all I look for. Quentin Grimes is definitely another name to watch for a big leap. It really just depends on the role they give Quentin Grimes. If he's involved more in the offense and plays a lot more minutes, then maybe he can take a bigger leap. If he kind of loses some minutes a little bit, so maybe like Josh Hart, and kind of, becomes more of the role player guy, then maybe he won't have a huge leap. Maybe he'll have a leap, but it may not be like a significant leap, if that makes any sense. Basically, that's kind of all I got about it. But this was really fun going over all these wings and stuff like that, because like you said, this was an interesting position. A lot of guys had, the only one who had a really consistent regular season in a sense was Josh Hart when he was here, and Julius Randle. I mean, RJ Barrett had a topsy-turvy season. There were times Quentin Grimes couldn't find his shot. Obi Toppin was just inconsistent all year. Cam Reddish, complete lost cause. I mean, it was a weird position for the Knicks, and I do think that the wing spot is a place that the Knicks need to upgrade at in the offseason. We'll probably make another video explaining that some more into detail, but those are kind of my thoughts on it. Those are kind of my final thoughts on this episode for this. What do you think about all that, and if you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, my final thought would really just be watch out, for Quentin Grimes. I think Quentin Grimes is a guy who can pop off next year. I think he can take that Emmanuel Quickly leap. I don't think he's going to win sixth man of the year because, well, number one, he's not, all coming off the bench right now. But, whether it's here, whether he gets traded, wherever he goes, I think year 3 or wherever he plays, I think year 3 is going to be a big year for Quentin Grimes. I love what he can do when he's red hot. I love what he can do when that shot's consistent. He's a fun player. He's an electric player. And I'm really excited to see kind of how this position looks next year because, everyone looks at the wing and forward spot to get a superstar. Everyone looks at that spot to, acquire talent. So I wonder if the Knicks are going to acquire another wing. Definitely going to be a curious situation. Obviously, we're going to monitor the Josh Hart situation. As you mentioned, we're definitely going to do a video about that. But if you guys want to be around to hear a video about Josh Hart, if you guys want to stick around for the final episodes of the Report Card series, you guys should like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you guys know next time we post a video. If you would prefer to listen to the audio version of this podcast, maybe my beard isn't great. Maybe I need a haircut. Who knows? I know Dylan. I know the audience would prefer to look at Dylan than me. But with that being said, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you guys can check out the audio version of this podcast there. And you guys can check out Empire Sports Media. We've got a bunch of great written content there, whether it's about the Knicks, the Yankees, Giants, Jets, Islanders, Rangers. I mean, there are a million New York sports teams, so make sure you check them out. But with that being said, we'll see you guys in the next video. You can check out above our heads, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.